Ladies and gentlemen of the internet, this is your wake-up call. Let's talk about the political landscape that has turned the citizens of this country against each other. If you are seriously defending one side over the other, I think you need to take a few steps back and look at how this is impacting the country as a whole. The purpose of this video is to provide neutral ground so that each side can answer one mind-boggling question. Why do you accept the lies? Now, don't be naive and try to convince one another that your side does not lie. Tap into your intelligence and understand that the Republicans and Democrats are two wings on the same evil bird. As we know, the politicians lie to us, but what I can't understand is how can you follow behind and condone these people lying to you, misleading you, and making up stories about one another simply to get your vote? The American people have lost sight of what they are supposed to be voting for. Now, before I go into this, understand it's not my job to open your minds, make you see the light, or remember the fact that the bad, twisted, misguided decisions you make now will make life hell on earth for your children and their children. Is it really so difficult for you all to see that this is just about money? They will tell you they want the violence to stop, but do they really? Do you really think it would be difficult for the most powerful military to prevent domestic terrorism if the government really wanted them to? Let's take a quick look at these charts of the worst mass shootings in American history. Now, if that chart was true, what are these? Didn't they also happen in America? And didn't they also involve mass shootings? Perhaps you don't know about these because most of the victims were black people. This is a blatant lie. Even when evidence is presented to you, many of you will completely disavow the knowledge. I have already put together a masterpiece of a video explaining exactly how racism is taught, but I suppose many of you haven't even watched it or even know that it exists. Those who want the truth, click the link above. The biggest lie your government officials and Tucker Carlson constantly tell you is that racism and white supremacy is a hoax.
But the whole thing is a lie. If you were to assemble a list, a hierarchy of concerns, of problems this country faces, where would white supremacy be on the list? Right up there with Russia, probably. It's actually not a real problem in America. The combined membership of every white supremacist organization in this country would be able to fit inside a college football stadium? I mean, seriously. This is a country where the average person is getting poorer, where the suicide rate is spiking. White supremacy, that's the problem. This is a hoax. Just like the Russia hoax. It's a conspiracy theory used to divide the country and keep a hold on power. That's exactly what's going on.
Look at some of these examples of suppressed history, and then explain in the comments which part of this is a hoax. This is what should have been taught in schools along with many other things that I've covered. Now, let's look at some reality. This administration has misled many Americans. Many of them are not necessarily misled. They enjoy the racial tension this administration has stirred up, so they will vote to keep the system in place. They have made a massive deal about the Confederate monuments and Confederate battle flag, but that flag represented a group that was against the United States. Yet, those flags keep popping up at Trump rallies. Again, they lie to you about what the flag and monuments stand for, but if you just do a little research, you can determine that for yourself. It's not rocket science. I'm not going into detail about that, but if you watched my video How Racism is Taught, you would already know about those flags and the other states that are currently using the true Confederate flag. Watch the video. And if you notice, they've started talking about those flags and monuments, haven't they? Because they've already moved on to the next distraction and they know that you're already fully engaged. These are the things they tell and show you to distract you and prevent you from working together. United we stand, divided we fall. Your own government is using that against you. You see that these monuments are mostly in those same Confederate states. Which brings me to one of the latest lies. The coronavirus and the way it has been handled by this administration has caused plenty of divisiveness.
We have it totally under control. It's one person coming in from China.
We think we have it very well under control. We pretty much shut it down coming in from China.
You know, in April, supposedly it dies with the hotter weather. When it gets warm, historically, that has been able to kill the virus.
People are getting better. They're all getting better.
And the 15 within a couple of days is going to be down to close to zero.
It's going to disappear. One day, it's like a miracle. It will disappear.
And you'll be fine.
They're going to have vaccines, I think, relatively soon. Not only the vaccines, but the therapies. Therapies is sort of another word for cure.
We're talking about very small numbers in the United States. Our numbers are lower than just about anybody. It's really working out. And a lot of good things are going to happen. And we are responding with great speed and professionalism. It's going to go away.
Yeah, no, I don't take responsibility at all.
We're going to all be great. We're going to be so good. This came up, we came up so suddenly.
This is a pandemic. I felt it was a pandemic long before it was called a pandemic. All you had to do is look at other countries. The coronavirus, you know that, right? Coronavirus. And this is their new hoax. We're 15 people in this massive country. And because of the fact that we went early, we could have had a lot more than that. We're doing great. Our country is doing so great.
There was this focus on whether or not the numbers were being manipulated. With this government, it is extremely possible that the numbers have been manipulated. But let's get to it. Early this year, when we could have gotten ahead of this outbreak, this was said in secret.
And so what was President Xi saying yesterday?
Well, we were talking mostly about the virus, and I think he's going to have it in good shape, but, you know, it's a very tricky situation.
Indeed
it goes through air, Bob. That's always tougher than the touch. You know, the touch, you don't have to touch things, right? But the air, you just breathe the air, and that's how it's passed. And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus. You know, people don't realize we lose 25,000, 30,000 people a year here. Who would ever think that, right?
I know. It's
pretty amazing. And then I say, well, is that the same thing? This is more deadly. This is 5 per, you know, this is 5% versus 1% and less than 1%. You know, so this is deadly stuff. Now it's turning out it's not just old people, Bob, because today and yesterday some startling facts came out. It's not just older
exactly.
young people, to plenty of young people.
So
what's going on
give me a moment of talking to somebody, going through this with Fauci or somebody who kind of, it caused a pivot in your mind, because it's clear just from what's on the public record that you went through a pivot on this to, oh my God, the gravity is almost inexplicable and unexplainable.
Well, I think, Bob, really, to be honest with you,
sure, I want you to.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
Yes,
because I don't want to create a panic.
Each time, the president defended himself and deflected blame.
If you believe it's the president's responsibility to protect America, why would you downplay a pandemic that is known to disproportionately harm low-income families and minority communities?
Yeah. Well, I didn't downplay it. I actually, in many ways, I upplayed it in terms of action.
Not only has Mr. Trump admitted on tape to downplaying COVID-19, but for months he pushed messaging contrary to the science, even repeating again last night that the virus is going to disappear.
Over a period of time, sure, with time, it goes many deaths. And you'll develop herd, like a herd mentality. It's going to be herd developed, and that's going to happen. That will all happen. But with the vaccine, I think it will go away very quickly.
No matter which way you spin this, he lied to the American people. The definition of the word lie is a false statement made with deliberate intent to deceive, an intentional untruth, a falsehood, something intended or serving to convey a false impression, imposture, For example, his flashy car was a lie that deceived no one, an inaccurate or false statement, a falsehood. Everything you just watched fits into this definition flawlessly. Still, the Trump worshippers cannot discern truth from lies, right from wrong, and in particular, they cannot fathom their master and leader doing anything wrong. I'm sorry, but some of you are just hypocrites. So you're teaching your children that lying is bad while simultaneously showing them that you're worshiping liars.
I do want a balanced budget. I've heard people say, well, balance the budget within 20 years. I'm saying 20 years? What are you talking about? The finances of our country are a mess, but we're going to clean them up.
With nearly $20 trillion in national debt, that this president is committed to fiscal responsibility.
The president does not want a budget that will add to the deficit.
This budget does not balance the budget.
We will balance the budget without making cuts in Social Security and Medicare.
The president is focused on, one, balancing the budget, bringing that debt down.
Growth is what our focus is, which is why we're willing to accept increased short-term deficits.
We're really increasing values, and maybe in a sense we're reducing debt.
Are you confident that the economy will grow consistently enough to cover these costs that otherwise would lead to a ballooning deficit?
Yes.
What can we realistically expect the national debt to be by the end of the and I hope this is not hypothetical, but by the end of the president's first term?
I don't have a projection for that right now.
The deficit, which was one of the other criticisms, is coming down, and it's coming down rapidly. Growth solves a lot of problems.
We anticipate a much lower deficit share of GDP.
I don't know if you noticed, but deficits seem to be coming down. And last month it was reported, and everybody was surprised, but I wasn't surprised.
4 years going forward of $1 trillion+ deficits. How is that fiscal conservatism?
I wouldn't say that we needed deficits to get the economy starting.
Deficits have certainly worsened in the first 2 years, but over 10 years, we believe that deficits will improve.
Give me another year or two on the deficit. As a share of GDP, we will cycle down that budget deficit in the years ahead.
The whole deficit thing is so contingent on the health of the economy, or the lack thereof.
Our economy is phenomenal.
While you are all caught up in this black versus white, blue versus red, and Republican versus Democrat foolishness, you need to understand that all of the division you are supporting will affect future generations of your family. There are some who would love another civil war or even a race war. What happens if you get your wish and millions of Americans die? Are you really ready to be responsible for the murder of your own family members? Are you really prepared to explain to your children why so many people have died, or why there are no more schools, or why they can't go grocery shopping, or why they no longer have friends who are alive? Are you prepared to watch the destruction of this country because of an ideology that already divided the country once? The breathtaking stupidity that it takes to self-destruct continually is mind-boggling. The U.S. works so hard at suppressing its history. Researching that history reveals that the country never learns from its mistakes and is content with repeating self-destructive tendencies that only lead to more devastation. The politicians are greedy, and they are in it only for themselves. They manipulate you and use your money to bolster that manipulation, and those of you who worship them make it easier for them to get away with it. They are now telling you another lie in which they are blaming each other for not passing another stimulus package. Look, all of these people are millionaires, and they're fighting over whether or not you deserve to get any money to help pay your bills for a pandemic that they made worse. Do you recall such a drawn-out fight when the tax breaks were being given to the wealthy? Do you remember any drawn-out battles when Bush and Obama gave the banks and automotive industry billions of dollars? When will you all realize they do not give a damn about the American people unless they are one of their wealthy donors? This is not rocket science, not even brain surgery. This just comes with observing what they've been doing for decades, and it never changes, yet for whatever reason, you people can't see it. Here is another lie that many blinded by the right individuals wholeheartedly believe, even though that claim is devoid of facts. Did you get the Manfred Mann reference there? And yes, the left also lies, so spare me the attacks. Trump and the administration are now telling you that mail-in voting will lead to widespread fraud. Please, anyone, show me the undeniable facts and not just right-wing talking points. They ignore the voter suppression they instigated in Georgia and Florida. So many overlook the fact that people hate vote against anyone that has an agenda that appears to help people of color in any way. Amazingly, people watch and believe incoherent nonsense like this.
500,000 incorrect absentee ballot applications were sent all across the state of Virginia, including to many dead people. This was an unprecedented mailing flub that's heightened concerns about the integrity of expanding mail-in voting and mail-in voting efforts. It's a disaster. All over Virginia, 500,000 votes. So that's something you have to think about. We don't want to have a rigged election. I know that. And you have to be very careful when you mention, as you constantly do, Russia, or you mention China, or you mention Iran, or others that attack our election system. And when you have this mail-in voting, it's very susceptible. It's something that can be easily attacked by foreign countries and by, frankly, Democrats and by Republicans. And I think that it's something you have to start thinking about very seriously. Our system's not equipped for it. The post office is not equipped for it. And people should vote like they did in World War I and World War II. And your numbers will be, in 90 days or less, your numbers will be very good, I think, much better on the coronavirus or the China virus. but it's something you have to look at and say, this is just crazy. This just came out, 500,000 incorrect ballot applications sent all over the state of Virginia to many people that weren't living. They had some sent to pets, dogs. This is what we're going to get into, and it's going to be a disaster.
The fact he is fixated on this is so concerning. He is stuck on repeat, and he's never provided any evidence for any of this nonsense that he keeps saying. He only cares about himself and not the safety of the citizens, so he is bent on making you all stand in line during the pandemic with the hope that you won't. He has attempted to destroy the Postal Service so your ballots may or may not arrive on time. He is not telling you that those ballots that were delivered to dead people, or animals as he says, are generally caught and returned. The dead people receiving ballots occur if the voter administration is not notified that the voters are deceased. That is a human error, not voter fraud. The animals receiving ballots occur when idiot humans register their animals' names as people, along with their own. That is human stupidity, not voter fraud. But he tells you all of this nonsense, and a large part of his worshippers believe it. I know fraud exists, but it's not on the scale that he claims. The most significant cases of fraud that I recall have been by Republicans, 2 in Florida during presidential elections, and a considerable voter suppression drive in the recent governor's race in Georgia. Plus, if the race is close enough, the Electoral College will be there to ensure another Republican wins the presidency, despite the fact most Americans don't want a Republican president. Now, if you're so concerned about voter fraud, tell the idiots to stop registering their animals and make sure that you let the voter administration know if someone is deceased. Every time I see Trump do things like this, I remember why it's so easy for him to get away with it.
We won with highly educated. We won with poorly educated. I love the poorly educated.
Now, let me ask the religious people a question. Why do the white Christian evangelicals support everything about this administration when much of what they have done goes against Christianity and the code Christians live by? Now, the Department of Homeland Security recently stated that white supremacists remain the most persistent and lethal threat in the U.S. through 2021. Can Fox viewers tell me why they don't report this on your network? What about MSNBC viewers? CNN viewers? Of course, they won't say it, but this administration caters to white supremacy. Only those who turn their backs on reality, or are too emotionally caught up in politics, or those who refuse to even research will agree with all of this behavior. They want to label the controversial Black Lives Matter movement as a hate group, but refuse to look at facts like this. Numbers don't lie, people do. Instead of regurgitating talking points, why don't you compare actual numbers of people killed by Black Lives Matter to the number of people killed by racist hate groups? But you probably won't. Many of you only see out of your right eye or your left eye, while I can see clearly out of both. In many of my videos, I've revealed facts about the truth behind the so-called protests, the people who are actually doing the looting and rioting, and the way America ignores the problem when it impacts people of color. Let me summarize. All of the race hate is stupid, dumb, and shows your ignorance and significant lack of intelligence. If you research American history, you will understand that Black people have, on many occasions, created self-sustaining communities away from white people, which is what the racists wanted, right? So why, in each of those instances, did these white racists go out of their way to create lies so they could go into those communities, go after the Black people, and destroy everything? Those Black people did what they asked and stayed away from them. So why didn't the racists stay away from the Black people? Much of the country doesn't even know about those massacres. Watch the videos on my channel and learn the truth. Many of you pride yourselves in intelligence. For a lot of you, your intelligence is based on a system that withholds the true nature of the country and the facts about history. Learn the truth about Black history. Learn the truth about how the two major parties switched identities, and know the truth about how your mind became so easy to control. You should really open your eyes so you can see that you are being manipulated against each other under the premise of deception. This has been your wake-up call.